All right. Hope everybody had a good couple of days off for snow. There's a couple things that we're going to talk about today, or really that I'm going to talk about today that you're going to be doing. First off, as I'm going over these couple problems, I expect you guys to have a sheet of paper out, writing this stuff down, taking down notes. So, first off, and then after we get done with this, you will also receive a packet that you will be working on that I will take a grade on. That I expect everyone to finish. All right. So, first off, you should notice that there's something different with this. Okay. Now, the thing that you should notice is now we have a number in front of that x squared. Okay. Notice before all we dealt with is x squared, and we found the factors of this last number that add up to that middle number. Okay, that's all we've been doing. Now it's a little bit different. Okay. Now, since anytime you see a number in front of that x squared, you have to factor it out differently. First off, the first thing that you should try to do is find a greatest common factor of these three numbers. Okay? You need to look through and see if they have a greatest common factor. A 7, a 29, or a 4. Those three numbers, there is no greatest common factor. Okay? So we're going to move on from that. So that's the first thing you should look at. See if you can go ahead and factor out a greatest common factor between the 7, the 29, and the 4. Okay. Now, because we have a number in front of that x squared, the only way we can factor it out is by multiplying the first number times the last number. Okay. So we're going to multiply 7 times 4. So I'm going to come over to the side. I'm going to multiply 7 times 4, and that's going to give me 28. Okay. Now, so we multiplied the first number times the last number. Okay. Now, we need to find factors of 28 that add up to whatever that middle term is. Okay? Whatever that middle term is. So really kind of doing the same thing that we were doing, but the only difference is because there's a number in front of that x squared, we need to multiply the first number times the last number. That's what I did over here. So now we need to find factors of 28 that add up to whatever that middle number is. In this case, it's a 29. Okay? So it might take you a little bit to try to find factors, but really, think about it. If you multiply 28 times 1, you get 28. If you add both of those together, 28 and 1, you get 29. Okay, so we figured out our two numbers. Now, remember, what is our reasoning of doing this? Why are we doing this over here to the side? Why are we doing all this? Well, because we need to split that middle term up. Okay, how do we split it up? Well, we just figured out the two numbers to split it up. So now, the only thing that's going to change is that middle term. So when I come over to here again, I'm going to write it out. 7x squared. Okay, that stays the same. Now we split up that 29x into this 28 and this 1. So plus 28x and plus a 1x. Now, notice I'm not messing with this 4 also, so that's just going to drop down and stay the same, so plus 4. Okay? Does everybody understand me so far? So we started out, we multiplied the first term times the last term and got it 7 times 4, we got it 28. So now we found factors of 28 that add up to whatever that middle term is. The whole reason why we did this is to split up that 29x into whatever our two numbers are here. Okay, so we have 28 and we have a 1. So now we're going to do just like we have been doing. We're going to factor by grouping. Okay? We're going to split this in half almost. Split it up into 2 terms and 2 terms. Okay? We're going to find the greatest common factor of that 7x squared and the 28x okay. So I'm going to come over to the side, if you guys need to, find the greatest common factor of just these 2 terms. So I factored them out completely over to the left. And now I'm going to circle my greatest common factor. Looks like I have a 7, I also have an x, and an x. So my greatest common factor is 7x. Well, what's going to be left when I factor that out? Well, all I have left from the 7x squared is just a 1 and an x, so just write down x. All I have left from this 28x is a 2 times a 2, and that's plus 4. Now, what's the greatest common factor of these 2 terms? Of 1x and 4? Well, the only thing that can go into both of them is 1. So the greatest common factor is a positive 1. Now, what is left if you factor out a 1 from these 2 numbers? Well, just the same thing you started out with. Okay, now look what we have. We have 2 of these x plus 4s, so we can just write down one of them. And we're going to group together this 7x because it's on the outside of the parentheses. And we're also going to group together this plus 1, which is outside of the parentheses. And we're done. Okay. We're going to go over another problem, so just hold off for a second. Alrighty. So we've already solved one of these, so let's solve another one. Now remember, okay, you guys are used to not having a number in front of this x squared. Okay, now we do. So the first thing I want you to do is figure out if there's a greatest common factor between the 5, the 13, and the 6. That's all you got to do first. Okay, just by looking at that, you see that that is not going to happen. Okay, so there is no greatest common factor between the 5, the 13, or the 6. Now that we have established that, now remember what I told you to do. We're going to multiply this first number times the last number. So come over to the side and multiply that out. And that's going to give me 30. Okay. It's the first, so that's what you're going to do next. Multiply that first number times that last number. And you're going to get 30. Now, we're going to find factors of what number we just figured out, the 5 times the 6, that gives us 30. So factors of 30 that add up to whatever that middle term is. Okay? Whatever that middle term is. In this case, it's 13. So add up to 13. Okay? Now, it might take you a minute to figure it out, but so factors of 30 that add up to 13. Well, I know that 3 times 10 gives me 30. If I add 3 plus 10, I also get 13. So we figured out our two numbers. Okay, that's what we just did. All right, now, remember, what was our main objective for doing all this over here to the side? Well, we need to split up that middle number. Okay, that's what we're doing. We're going to split it up into this, whatever two numbers that you find. So the 3 and the 10 are our two numbers. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So I got a 5x squared plus a 3x plus a 10x and then plus 6. Notice the only numbers that I changed, or the only number that I changed, was that middle term. Okay, it kind of branches off into that 3 and that 10. Same numbers we had over here. Okay. Notice my 5x squared stayed the same and my plus 6 stayed the same. Okay. All you're doing is branching off this middle number. Okay. Now, we're going to draw a little line down the middle and we're going to figure out that greatest common factor. Now, the greatest common factor of 5x squared and 3x, well, you can just look at that and see, okay, I know 5 and 3, there's no common factors beside 1. The greatest common factor is just going to be x. Okay? If you need to, guys, come over to the side and factor it out completely. Okay? Come over to the side and factor it out. Okay? Now, find the greatest common factor. Well, the only thing they have in common is an x. What is left? What is left from this 5x squared? Well, just 5x. What is left from this 3x? Well, just 3. Okay? Now we're going to look here and find the greatest common factors of 10x and plus 6. Okay, so if you need to, come over to the side. 10x, I know 5 times 2 times x. Okay, from the 6, I know 3 times 2 gives me 6. So come over to the side and factor these numbers out completely. Okay. Find the greatest common factor. Well, it looks like all I have in factor is a 2. That's the only ones I have in common. Alright? So then my 2 goes right here. Now, what is left from this 10x? A 5 and an x. So 5x. What is left from this 6? No, just a 3. So plus 3. Okay, notice, what do we have here? Ding, ding, ding. Well, we have an x plus 2. I'm going to group that together because that's outside of the parentheses. And then because I have 2 of those 5x plus 3's, I'm just going to write down 1. And you're done. All right. Now, I want you to look at this example. Yeah. Now, you know how I talked about first thing you should do is look at all 3 of these terms, a 6, a 22, and an 8. Okay. Is there a greatest common factor between these 3 terms? Well, yeah. They have a greatest common factor of at least 2. If I factor out a 2 from each one of these, okay? If I factor out a 2 from each one of these, what's going to be left from this 6? Well, I'm just going to have a 3x squared. Just cut all the numbers in half. From the 22, if I factored out a 2 from it, or really divided it by 2, what's left? Well, 11x. if I factored out a 2 from this 8, what's going to be left? We're on minus 4. Okay? So here's an example when there is a greatest common factor, and so all you're going to do is just factor out that 2. Now, you're not even going to mess with this 2 until the very end. Okay? So now, we're back to almost square one. Okay? So we have a number in front of this x squared, so we're going to multiply this 3 times the last number. So multiply the 3 times the negative 4. You guys see that? 3 times that negative 4. That's going to give me a negative 12. So we need factors of a negative 12 that add up to what? What's our middle term? It's an 11. Okay? Now, if it's a negative 12, you know you're going to have a negative number. And if you're trying to get a positive 11, a sum of a positive 11, you're probably going to have to go with a positive 12 times a negative 1. If you multiply these two terms, you're going to get a negative 12. If you add these two terms, 12 plus a negative 1, you get a positive 11. So you figured out your two numbers. Okay, now remember, why do we do all this to the side? Well, to split that middle number up. So everything else is going to stay the same. But now, instead of 11x, we're going to write down a 12x and a negative 1x. Then you drop down that negative 4. So remember, this 11x kind of branched off into a 12x and a negative 1x. Everything else stayed the same. Okay? Look how these branched off. Everything else stayed the same. Oop, almost got that. Ooh, don't like that end of the parentheses. Okay? Now we're going to factor by grouping. Exact same thing as what we did. Split it in half. Find the greatest common factor of the first two terms of these two terms. And then find the greatest common factor of these two terms. Okay? Now the greatest common factor of these two terms, if you need to, go over to the side and factor it out. Looks like it's going to be a 3x. Okay? So I could factor out a 3x. What's going to be left if I factor out a 3x from these two terms? Well, I'm going to have an x left here. Okay. And then from this 12x, what am I going to have left? Oh, just a plus 4. Okay. So the greatest common factor of these two terms is going to be 3x. What's going to be left? The x plus 4. Now, from this, a negative 1x and a negative 4. I can factor out a negative 1. What happens when I factor that out? Well, I have an x and I have a plus 4. Guys, how do we go back and check and see if we factored this out correctly? Well, distribute. The negative 1 times an x gives me a negative x. A negative 1 times a positive 4 gives me a negative 4. So we did that correctly. Okay. Now you've done all the work. Now it comes down to the last part. Remember, that 2 stays the same. You don't even mess with it. But now we're going to group these terms together. Outside of the parentheses is a negative 1 and a positive 3x. So a positive 3x and a negative 1. Because I have 2 of these x plus 4s, I'm just going to write down 1. And you're done. Okay. Let me show you something else now. So first thing you do is do what? You find out if any 3 of those terms have a greatest common factor. Okay, you see that the 4, the negative 1, and a 7, there's no greatest common factor besides 1. Okay, so that you're not going to mess with that. So what do we do next? Well, because we have a number in front of that x squared, okay, remember we have to multiply the first terms times the last term. So a 4 times the 7 gives me a 28. So now we need factors of 28 that add up to what? Well, just that middle term. Now that's really a -1, okay? So you need a -1. Now here's the tricky part. Okay, you could spend maybe 10, 15 minutes trying to figure out factors of 28 that add up to a -1. Here's the thing. There are none. That's the tricky part. In this case, so you could go and try to find factors of 28 that add up to a -1. Okay? You're not going to find one, or you're not going to find factors. So, all you're going to do is write down prime. That's it. If there are no factors, once you multiply the first number times the last number, and they have to add up to that middle number, okay? If you cannot find any factors that add up, or factors of 28 that add up to a -1, you're just going to write down prime. That's it. Okay? Now, it might take you a while to try to figure out this. If you tried to work out like 7 times 4, factors of 14 times 2, you're not going to find any. All right, so this is your answer. Prime is your answer. You're done. You are done. Okay. For right now, today I want you guys, you're getting ready to receive a packet of work. Okay. This is what I want you to do. All right, so it says the front page, it should say page 23 at the bottom of it. Okay, the page that says 23 at the bottom of it. You're going to be doing numbers 1 through 18. All right, numbers 1 through 18, that page 23, it's the first page. Now, if you flip over to the next page, I don't want you to worry about that page 24 for right now. That deals with solving. Really, it's pretty simple. It's actually very simple. It's really the same stuff you have been doing, but just taking it a step further. So I don't want you to do that. I want you to do page 23, 1 through 18. Then I also want you to do page 25, numbers 1 through 14. Okay. After you're done, the substitute will have the answers at the front, and you can check your answers. You guys should come close to finishing it today. The following day, we're going to go over the answers together. I'm sorry, you will go over the answers together. The substitute will post the answers on the board, and then you will go over the answers. So for today, these are the 2 things I want you to do. Page 23, 1 through 18, and page 25, 1 through 14. Now, if the substitute needs to replay some of the video, that's perfectly fine. I'm also okay with you guys working in partners. But if you guys are getting too loud, the substitute is more than welcome to have you guys work individually. But that's the substitute's call. I look forward to being back with you guys, and make sure you're on your best behavior. Thank you very much.